Hello, and welcome to Coder Radio. So today is our long-awaited mailbag episode. It's been a while. Let's start off with something fun first before we jump into all that. I got my little paws on the Analog 3D, and I wrote a brief review of it on dominicm.com. I'll link that in the show notes. It is an interesting little machine. So for those who don't know, Analog makes FPGA, that's Field Programmable Gate Arrays, which is fun to talk about, but for your purposes, what it means is you are emulating or not even emulating, you are implementing the hardware. This is really a schlocky definition here, instead of emulating it in software, right? So you're getting native performance. In the case of the Analog 3D, they've also added some love to make these N64s. That's what it does, right? It runs N64 cartridges. These games run properly on modern TVs, right? So bigger TVs, high definition TVs. Non-CRT TVs in particular. Good stuff. I tested it out with a couple games, Star Wars Rogue Squadron, Star Wars Pod Racing, which of course is set in the best Star Wars movie, The Phantom Menace. I will tolerate no question on that because Jar Jar, Misa the best. And the very, very bad, I think it's Star Wars Dark Forces or something like that. It's really, truly terrible. One of the interesting aspects of kind of going back and, digging through Swap Me website to find cartridges is this is like the beginning of developers learning how to program in 3D for games, right? So there are some god-awful implementations. You can definitely see some learning, in particular learning about how cameras ought to work, right? Virtual cameras in the game to give you a player perspective. Good stuff. I'm not 100% sure, unless you're like a diehard N64 fan, that I'd recommend going out and getting one of these. I am a big fan of Analog. I love their Analog Pocket. But, I know this is going to be a little maybe controversial. I think that generation, that N64 generation of games, doesn't hold up as well, let's say, as opposed to like Game Boy Advance and the SNES and stuff like that. Sega Genesis, right? Mostly because it feels, in hindsight, I guess, 30-something years of hindsight, that this was a total learning experience for many of these developers, right? This is all very new. They were just working on it. They were just learning how to work in 3D. So again, is it terrible? No, it's not. But is this something you need to run out and buy? I don't really think so. So we'll, just keep that in mind. So, right on to your emails. All right. So Jack writes, and I think there was a joke in the name here that I didn't get I think it was do you know Jack? Is it okay? So those old PC games, is that what it is? The you don't know Jack, like the old trivia games? Clever, if that's what you were going for. Is it really the year of Linux on the desktop? I think as close as it's going to be, right? I actually just wrote a post where, kind of twisting it. It is the year of Linux. Talking about a lot of the IoT work I've been doing, basically just like, if you go into Joe Normal's house, he's probably got something running Linux and he doesn't know it, right? I would say more than probably, almost certainly. Think smart TVs, think kitchen appliances, stuff like that. So, in a weird way, Linux is one, right? It is a majority install operating system for a lot of people. So that's, you can read more about that. That's an interesting take. I do, we'd have to call out here for Jack, who I'm 100% sure that's not your name. The impact of DHH and Omacub and Omarchi. I feel like that should be a hard K, like in Italian, but I'm told it's Omarchi. I know there's a little bit of pushback on this stuff. Yeah, there's certainly, and I understand the pushback, right? There's certainly a celebrity, DHH is increasingly building kind of like a guru following, but you can't deny the quality of the work. Omarchi is good. Omacub is good. Other people are making moves too, right? Hell, the GNOME Foundation themselves, KDE themselves, but also Cosmic is great from the folks over at System 76. I think it's easy to get a little too bogged down in the quarterly, monthly, whatever drama and just like zaprudering fine details between different releases, when if you go back, let's say 10 years, it was a lot rougher to use Linux on the desktop. And if you go back 15 years, it was a hell of a lot rougher. And a lot of those edges have been smoothed out, right? Just on my my System 76 laptop here that can relatively seamlessly switch between NVIDIA and the built-in AMD CPU for graphics is pretty significant. I mean, I personally have spent more time than I care to admit in the now relatively distant past trying to get graphics drivers and Wi-Fi drivers to work. So, you know, it it's easy to not understand what you have unless you've been in the past. And I would even to kind of more my area, right, the server side, the IoT side. There's just so much good stuff out there for so many different chipsets and systems on a chips that are all basically Linux. I mean, there's some BSD stuff. And, where we are now versus, again, where we were 10 years ago is you're getting a lot for free that you used to not get. And there's firms out there who are doing really interesting stuff, right? So I like the the Beagle boards, rather. Beaglebone is a specific one. Oh, no, Beaglebone Black is a specific one. And there's a Beaglebone Green, Beaglebone Enterprise, blah, 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 blah. That's an open standard that I think I know Texas Instruments manufactures them, and a couple other companies do. There's the stuff that the folks over at Toradex are doing, which is interesting. And I'm sure, somebody's going to write in and name a bunch of others. Going a little more mainstream, a little more, maybe like less industrial, less enterprisey. You have obviously Raspberry Pi, with Arduino, all interesting stuff that really has matured in the, let's say, last decade. So I don't know. I think it's great. I think we're on the right track here. Yeah. We would be remiss if we didn't mention the other operating systems. Windows is Windows. They seem to be struggling, as Microsoft often does. Really not putting up too much new there. But in a way, they're, WSL2, right? So they're kind of on the Linux train too. Apple's where things are a little more complicated. I think you're being silly. And Jack isn't in his email, but I just kind of taking a tangent here. If you try to deny the quality and the performance of the M series chips, in particular now the M5, they're frankly the leader, right? I mean, one of my great frustrations as a hobbyist gamer is if Apple just cared a little more, these MacBooks would be unbelievable for gaming. So there's that. We also got to think about the state of iOS dev. I think it's kind of rough right now. The trends that we talked about years ago, enterprises were going to go away from native dev, have continued. Yeah, so all hail React Native, right? Which ironically is not really native. I would also refer you back to my episode with Joe of basically it's a way to run Rails apps as mobile apps and tie into like certain in-app purchase stuff like that. So pretty good. We're going to stop here for an ad. Still running your business on last week's spreadsheets? Alice automates your data pipelines, connecting old systems to modern dashboards. Stop chasing data. Finally trust your numbers. Learn how at alice.dev. All right. Well, now that you've hopefully checked out alice.dev or vorpal.bot, quick correction. It's a Joe Mazzolotti, and the name of the tool I was talking about was called Hotwire Native. Don't know how I forgot it because I literally interviewed him for like an hour not so long ago. But yeah, so Hotwire Native, and yeah, that's the name of the tool. So moving right along here, and hopefully I don't butcher any other names. I got a bunch of messages this last month that I was having a tough time kind of, not making them so specific to the individuals to put on the air. And I ended up coming with, frankly, these were some frustrated messages, I would say, not with the show, but just with, one guy was going through a layoff, another guy's just having personal problems, another guy's frustrated at work because he was up for promotion, but I guess they either hired or outsourced in lieu of promoting him. And the theme, and there was a cadre of you younger folks who are just coming out of school or looking to come out of school coming up in May and are frankly rightly concerned about getting a job, right? Getting a junior developer job. Hey, the underlying theme, and maybe I'll treat the junior developer one separately because I think that actually I can be more practically helpful. But dealing with the other ones is, you know, you can't, and I'm terrible at this, but you have to unplug sometimes. Because when you don't unplug, that's when you make, at least for me, that's when you make like wild mistakes, right? You snap at the customer who is giving you a hard time, or you are overly critical on somebody in a code review, or you don't take feedback yourself in a code review, or other kinds of feedback that you probably should take with a little humility, and you just get defensive and angry. There's also we used to say Twitter is not the real world. Then it got bought and it's even less of the real world. But it is true, right? Like the angry kind of nonsense that you'll see online, particularly in our little bubble. And there are, there's entire like subreddits dedicated, and frankly, some good subreddits that occasionally just fly off the rails that I just feel are really dedicated to negativity, right? Like, there's so many tools available to us now. There's so many languages. It's so easy to get started with new ones, especially if you're more senior. You have a little bit of experience of like, I won't say design patterns, but yeah, kind of design patterns and ways of doing things and just, general computing that you don't need to be flipping out because somebody, I don't know, maybe you're a go head, right? A gopher, and you're tired of hearing people rant on about Rust. You just don't listen, right? Just you don't need to be in that subreddit. You don't need to be listening to that podcast. I subscribe to tons of podcasts in particular. And if I see a topic that I don't care for, I just don't listen to it. I skip the episode. There's no harm in that. So, I think it's important to unplug. I think longtime listeners know a few of my favorite ways are board games. I was just talking to a dude who talked about Tai Chi on the beach. That makes a ton of sense. Video games, I prefer offline video games for this because I think you get some of the same somewhat unhealthy dynamics, especially if you're on like the voice chat. Just take it easy. I know it's a tough time for a lot of people. I almost didn't address this at all. And believe me, I've been there. You guys know I get very annoyed with, certain difficulties you might have in business, or, sometimes there's a million things that can go wrong, right? There's regulatory issues you can get. There's tax issues. You get laid off. It's just, you can't let it get to you too much, and you got to unplug and realize it's probably not going to be too bad. Now, for you junior folks out there, well, that's a real practical problem. This you can't just. I hope that you find a way to make yourself stand out. And one of the challenges I think you're facing, and I'm hoping to have somebody on who's a little more in that hiring for larger corporations, particularly hiring junior people on in the next month or so to really get some insight. She seems pretty good, but it's just, obviously scheduling these things can be challenging. A point she made to me in our pre-conversation was, the biggest hurdle for, let's say you're a junior developer out of, I don't know, USF or whatever, right? And name your college here. You're going to have to pass that AI in quotes, HR filter. And that can be tough. And that's where I think making your resume stand out, or maybe I don't know how well this will hold up, but I would even say being a little more salesy and like reaching out, trying to get a connection who maybe knows somebody where you want to go work, to almost go around that filter, right? To be like, oh, well, the hiring, if you can somehow know the hiring manager and they can flag you, you just got to get the interview, right? I would definitely, unless you're working in a place that explicitly says they don't use them, I would definitely, be whipping up Claude Code and making some demo projects. I'd probably, if I were super junior, emphasize that you're eager to use AI tools. I can't imagine the organization off the top of my head that would be hiring a ton of juniors that wouldn't want them using AI tools. Right now, it's pretty clear that Claude is heavily in the lead for reasons that make sense. Obviously, ChatGPT Codex is coming along too, but definitely. It's so funny, right? Because ChatGPT, I think, has more users. It is more generally the well-known one by normies. But that coding functionality, Claude has really done a great job. I would even talk about things like plugging in your AI tools to your editor. I'm assuming a lot of you junior folks are using VS Code, which, it's fine. I use VS Code. You could talk about Copilot to some degree, right? Which again is backed by like Claude or whatever the default model is these days. So, it's something to keep in mind. I don't think, especially just coming in, that it's worth being a Luddite. That's an overly charged term. I don't mean to say that people are critical of AI or Luddites, but you want to seem like you're young, you're eager, you're onto the next thing, not, you're like a, I don't know, you're like a curmudgeon like me, but in a 20-year-old's body. You don't want to seem that way. So it's just my advice. I don't know. I'm hoping to have this woman on. It could give us more insight. Yeah, it's a tough market out there. I do think we're going to end up having a little bit of an upswing again in a year, just because I think some of these firms are over laying people off. So there's that. But you're going to have to see how it goes, and it's going to be tough. You got to make yourself stand out. So that's going to be it on that slightly depressing note. We have a really interesting conversation for next week with the VC. And then we have a ton of stuff. And the problem is I'm recording a lot of this in the same week. So I have to figure out the sequencing of the episodes. But yeah, it's going to be good. But I wanted to address the mailbag because this is the first time we've gotten really so many on the one topic of basically frustration and being able to unplug, that I thought, okay, it was time to maybe, and then get your feedback, right? Am I crazy? Is in particular my advice to the juniors to look at, using those Claude tools and those AI tools. Is that maybe off base? I feel like it's not, but happy for any feedback. Go check out the Discord. Talk to you soon.